Five Star Founder is a podcast created by founders for founders. I believe everyone you ever meet knows something you don't. Each episode features a founder from a variety of backgrounds, sectors, and entrepreneurial stages with whom I hope to learn, celebrate, understand, and get a deeper insight into their world. We will cover everything from what drove our founders to start their company to what keeps them awake at night, biggest regret to date, as well as their career highs and lows in their journey so far. Unlike most of the people we've featured in this series, our guest took a highly unusual path to her entrepreneurial journey. And that was one of the main reasons I wanted her to be on the podcast. Now, I must admit, I took way longer than I normally do preparing for this episode. To be honest, I'm a bit nervous. Most of the interviews we've had on so far have been your run-of-the-mill founders, whereas today's guest, Victoria Lee, not only trained as a journalist, but get this, she used to work for a couple of major newspapers in the UK. Imagine, if you will, an out-of-shape bloke having a kickabout with a Premier League football player. One good, the other not so much. That is literally what you're about to witness. I'm kidding, of course. I spoke with Victoria pre-show and she's lovely, but I hope she will forgive me and go easy on me if my interview technique is all over the place. Now, Victoria is the co-founder of £100 Social, a company that was founded in 2017. Anyone who knows me knows how much I love businesses that say exactly what they do on the tin. £100 Social literally helps business owners achieve a positive social media presence, generate new business leads, and helps keep companies top of mind via their social channels. Prices literally start at £100 a month. I'm not yet a customer, but from what I've seen, I would have no qualms recommending the service to others. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Hi, Sad. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
You know, I think it took me a couple of good hours of actually researching and thinking of what to say. So, and it's true, you know, you're a journalist. Pretty much I can probably fob my way into these kind of interviews, but, you know, with you, you're the real deal. So, you know, I've got to be on the ball. So for the benefit of the audience, could you tell us who you are and what you do?
Of course. So my name is Victoria and I run £100 Social, which is a low-cost social media and lead generation agency. The company is it's a completely bootstrapped startup, started at the kitchen table with an idea and went from there, and so it has slowly grown over time. We work with over 150 small businesses across the UK and other English-speaking countries, and we've built up to a team of 20. We all work remotely from different locations across the UK. We don't have an office. It's a completely remote company. And one thing that's different about the company as well is that we are a completely productized company. So we offer a productized service, which I think is quite an interesting way to run a business. That might be something we can talk about during the interview.
Yeah, interesting you say productize. It's quite a technical word for the layman. How did you come about creating this product, if you will?
So it's kind of my previous business. I also ran a marketing service and it wasn't productized. And I found that if I wanted to scale up the business, we needed to get those processes in place to enable us to do that. I think productized is sometimes misunderstood. It sometimes seemed to be when you put a process to something and there's no human thought that goes into it anymore. But actually, I think productizing something means that you've completely prepared for every eventuality, every potential customer service situation, every internal team situation. So it allows you to actually run a more efficient service, a better service for your customers, and also a more cost-effective service. Our pricing is really competitive and we're able to work at that pricing because of those processes that we've created.
How did it come about and what made you want to productize your service? Because for a lot of businesses, you know, like the holy grail is being able to replicate the process over and over again with a high level of consistency and without, you know, and you being able to plug in anyone within the business who has, you know, from someone who's very, very competent to someone who is competent but isn't a superstar. I mean, no, I'm not saying people aren't superstars or anything, but it's just so that way you know that you can replace someone if they were to ever leave. What was your inspiration behind it? Did you get a consultant to help you, or was it something that you came up with via your own research? What was your journey to creating that?
Yeah, I mean, it was more the previous business I ran that wasn't productized, and I could see that if you were to productize your service, it makes everything easier. So like you said, it means you can train people easier. The processes you create are the training manual. Everything is easier to scale up, and also as the person who runs the business, it's easier to step back because you have confidence that everyone knows what they're doing, because there is literally a process that people follow for every potential eventuality within the business.
And I guess, you know, like when something new comes in, you put something into the loop. So, you know, you add that into your processes or manuals. So if something completely unexpected were to happen, then you know exactly what to do for the next time it happens.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a lot of stuff online about productized businesses and how to productize your service. And I think you read them and it makes out that you're going to start this business, you're going to create your processes and boom, you're done. That's it. But it's not. It's a continual ongoing process. It's taken up till, it'll take maybe 3 years to get all of our processes in place, and they're continually developing. And if we don't look at a process regularly, then it becomes out of date. So it is a continual kind of work of art, keeping everything up to date and keeping it running.
Wow. Well, we should definitely come back to this later on. My first question is, I did my research. You obviously started life as a journalist. I think you were the editor of the university newspaper or the student union newspaper.
I wasn't the editor, I was the deputy news editor or something.
You should have been the editor because you're really good. A lot of the founders that I come across, or it could just be I'm biased to the certain pool of founders that I know. I don't think I've come across anyone who has started life as a journalist and gone on to be an entrepreneur or a business founder. How did that actually occur?
So when I graduated from university, I had my first job working at a newspaper in London, but it's kind of a personal thing. I've had back problems since I was really young, and it quickly became apparent that it was going to be really difficult to work in that kind of quite high stress, long hours environment and manage my back problems effectively. So quite quickly, I decided to leave my first job and take a step back. And then I was in the situation where I was having surgery on my back again. I was living with my mum and I was thinking, God, what am I going to do? So I went back, and when I was at university, I also had a paid role writing for an alumni magazine. So they gave me a flexible, small part-time role running their social media platforms and also commissioning and writing articles for the magazine. And then it kind of went from there. I built that up. I started getting work with other companies as a freelancer and slowly developed that into my first business. So that's how I kind of made the transition. It was more through necessity, I guess, than deliberate choice.
Essentially, like most journalists that I've come across, and a couple of my friends are journalists as well, they tend to kind of stick to their craft, and actually they never kind of ever stop being journalists. Do you miss that world that you had entered into as your first career?
I guess there's always what would it have been like if you'd stayed doing that? But I don't think I was doing it for long enough for it to be something that I really miss. I feel like now I've been running the business for so long, it's almost easy to forget I've ever done anything else. But I do like the fact that the business, £100 Social, is essentially a content marketing, social media, a written content business. So I'm still very much involved with creating written content and helping companies, reach people through that written content.
It's like the love of words, that kind of, sounds very artistic, but like you talk to barristers or you talk to authors, they fall in love with being able to speak and express themselves in a way that the other person understands. I want to go back to before you started the career. Is that how you kind of landed in journalism? Could you tell us a bit more about what made you want to go into it in the first place?
Oh, I don't know. From when I started university, I wanted to do that. So I joined the student newspaper and I got a job writing for the university magazine. I just think I like writing, and that seemed the natural way forward.
Do you still write for personal reasons, or not just necessarily just for business, but, do you ever keep a journal or something that keeps you fresh in that, keeps your writing skills active?
I wish I could say yes. It's one of those things that you always intend to do and never have time. I have great intentions to start writing more again, especially writing more about the experience of growing the business and writing more for the content on our website. That's something I'm working on at the moment. But in all honesty, I haven't written a huge amount recently, aside from sales messaging for clients and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I was having a nosy around your website. Everything obviously.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I wrote everything on our website. I do still write some things.
Yeah. It's perfect because I get exactly what you do. I think the first time I came across your company was just because I was looking through LinkedIn and we connected via that. And it was like £100 socials. Okay, that makes sense. And I didn't need to use that extra 3 or 4 seconds to click and actually understand. Why is your business called £100 social?
I think maybe this does go back to how I started my career, because I just wanted to make a business that was really crystal clear. It says on the tin what it does. And I think that's a massive marketing tool. There's so many companies where you go on their website and it's like mastermind to try and figure out what it is they're actually offering and what they can do for you and why you should be interested. So I want that to be clear from the word go. And I'm really glad you said that, you feel like on our website, it's very clear what we do. Yeah, so that's really where the name came from. We just wanted clarity.
Could it be because, when you're writing your bylines and, when you're writing your articles, especially when you're working in the tabloid or print world, you got to grab the reader's attention straight away. Yeah. Could there have been that kind of element of your previous training that kind of inspired
definitely.
you?
Especially when I worked at the Mirror, I was doing the digital writing only for online, and that is all you're doing is trying to get clicks onto that article. Just, and you've got to write headlines and wording that is going to grab people's attention.
So you could say, like Victoria used to write for tabloids and now she's working for the good guys or maybe the bad guys. I don't know.
You could say that. So, I don't think anyone we work with is a bad guy.
The thing is, I think what I want to say, I don't want to get into the politics and, all the whole, the newspapers of this country and all that kind of stuff, because you actually started life, you studied politics at uni. And is there an element of that has kind of inspired you for your career? Do you ever go back to what you studied at uni?
I think definitely in the way you think about it. I think studying politics is you think more about everything you do, all the actions you take in everyday life and what their impact is. But I don't know if it massively impacts the kind of day-to-day running of the business.
I studied geography myself, and I think, all knowledge kind of goes into the river of, sorry, I should see, I'm rubbish at interviewing people. What I meant to say was, like, I used to have a friend and she said, all truth goes into the river of knowledge, meaning everything you studied kind of applies to what you do. And sometimes, like people who actually study business, they kind of suck all the joy out of coming up with ideas and creative ways to kind of put your ideas out there. Whereas, I think people like us who kind of studied something which isn't necessarily business related can think of problems in a way that you necessarily wouldn't. Like, for example, in geography, we have this thing where great civilizations survive because they usually have one or two source of water. So I think in China, they have the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. So if one dried up, you'd have other. So the analogy is, in business, you must have multiple streams of customers or revenues. So if one dries up, you've got another one to fall back on. Whereas civilizations who died out, relied on one and they kind of needed it to survive for forever. So, it wouldn't really work. We're getting off topic here. From the story you mentioned, you started your previous company to £100 social out of necessity. Was there something within your background, or do you have a family member or anyone who comes from an entrepreneurial background that inspired you to set up your business?
No, again, I think it was more still due to necessity. So I had that first business that I was running and I could see that it was giving me the things I needed in terms that I could work from home. I had that flexibility, which was the original kind of push. But I could see that it was never going to grow beyond having kind of 5 or 6 clients, because it was offering a wide range of services. Every time you had a new client, you had to spend a huge amount of time working out how to offer what, exactly the bespoke, customized plan that they told you they wanted. And it was that led me to see that if I wanted to actually have a business doing the same thing, still getting those results for customers, but actually offer it on a wide scale to a lot of customers, I would have to productize the service. So that was the first thing. And the second thing was, with my first business, I'd say like 70% of people who talk to me would be really interested, and then they'd see the pricing and go, oh my God, I'm running like a new startup business. I can't afford to pay like nearly £1,000 a month for social media support. And that's the kind of pricing you have to charge when you haven't productized what you're doing, because it takes that much time. So I realized that there actually wasn't on the market, there was not an effective provider of low-cost social media and lead generation services. There were people on the market, mostly who outsourced to other countries, but there wasn't an effective UK-based provider. So again, that was the kind of hole in the market that I thought, actually, there's a really good opportunity here to make a business that fills that hole, and that's what we set out to do.
Wow. Going back to the productizing your service, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs or business founders or people looking to set up in terms of creating whatever they offer into a product?
Firstly, limit what you offer. So you can't productize your service if you offer too many things. It's just not possible. So we offer 3 services. We offer a blog writing service, a B2B lead generation service, and a social media post creation service. We can productize those 3, but I don't think it would work if we tried to offer 10 different services. So firstly, pick what you're good at and productize that. That also goes down to marketing. It's so much easier to market your business if you offer a really niche, bespoke thing. It's really difficult to market it if you offer a load of services and you try and appeal to everyone else. So productizing is about picking what you're good at, narrowing down, creating the processes, and identifying the niche of customers who are going to want to buy that niched service that you've created. So not only does advertising help with your effectiveness, help with your costs, it also helps with marketing, because you immediately work out who it is you should be marketing to, and you only need to focus on marketing to that small select group of people.
Wow. I know you've had previous form with your previous company too, and you saw all the mistakes or maybe where you could have improved. How did you actually go, decide, okay, this is the service that we should productize, why social and why, blog writing, for example?
I think social, just because it's what I knew. So I knew about writing, and I knew how to do social media because that's what I'd done for the past few years in my previous business, and I knew about long form content writing. So when we started the business, the only thing we offered was our £100 post plan, the plan that we still offer that cost £100 a month, and it's a social media post creation plan. So that was all we offered for about the first year. And then we slowly started to add on the additional services like LinkedIn lead generation, the blog writing a bit later on, but not until we'd kind of absolutely nailed that original offering. And that was almost running itself.
What are your biggest headaches after, yes, you've productized your service, and you still have your issues with churn, you still have issues with unhappy customers, I guess, and people who still don't get what you do. What are the headaches that you still encounter on a day-to-day basis, and what have you done to address them?
So I think every business has issues. There's no business that doesn't have customers churn and leave. I think having those processes in place make it easier to deal with those problems, and they make it easier from a managerial point of view to delegate those problems. If you have a customer who's not happy, if you have a process for how to deal with that, that means somebody else can follow that process. You don't have to as a manager, you don't have to get involved every single time. There's also the human part. Obviously, process is a set of guidelines. It's not a Bible, so that you always have to make sure that you've got highly trained people who are able to use judgment as well. I think another problem small businesses have is hiring. That's always one of the real challenges. We are a completely remote business, so we don't have an office, so there's that additional level. I don't know if I'd say it's an additional level actually, but there's a slightly different dynamic to hiring. It's not like you're hiring someone who's going to come into the office every day. You're hiring for a remote team. It does also mean that it gives us much more flexibility. I think it's a massive benefit to be remote, because we literally have the entirety of the United Kingdom to pick from to work for us. We don't have to right, we're based in Hertfordshire, so we can only have people local to us who could potentially work to us. So I'd say that's a benefit.
2 questions really. How do you identify and hire new people? And secondly, you have a very, very good social media presence. What are your best sources of sales? Obviously we don't want you to give away your secret sauce, but what kind of things do you find yourself? How do customers find you? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we first started out, I can tell you the way we got our first 30 clients within the first few months was 2 things. So firstly, we were completely bootstrapped, no funding, and we didn't have a marketing budget. So we started out, I posted into Facebook groups, talking to other entrepreneurs, talking about kind of what we were doing, what we were trying to build up, asking questions whenever we needed help publicly in those groups. So that was a massive way to build up our presence, because our ideal customers are small business owners and entrepreneurs. So we were easily reaching people that way. And the second thing was through LinkedIn. So using my LinkedIn profile to find those entrepreneurs, to connect with them, to message them, to put our proposition in front of them. And through just those two things I've just explained, within the first couple of months, we built up to 30 clients and gradually built up from there onwards. That LinkedIn method I've just explained, we then later on, further down the line, that found that was so effective that we actually turned that into a service offering. So that is our LinkedIn lead generation plan that we now sell as one of our 3 services. And that still today remains our biggest lead generation tactic. So about 80% of our new customers find us through LinkedIn. And we reach out, multiple members of our team reach out to people through LinkedIn. And that's how most people find us and book a call with us. And I think that's awesome. We're still doing that because it's obviously that is the service we're selling. So we're selling it to people who have seen it actually work. Which
practice what you preach.
Yeah, practice what you preach, exactly.
I want to go back to your first 30. Most companies, most people I've been speaking to, they kind of go from one customer. Could you tell us the moment that the first customer actually paid up and signed up? What was that like for you?
I actually can't remember. I can't remember at all, but I would imagine it was probably highly stressful because we'd have been looking at all the systems, checking the payments that had gone through, checking all this stuff we'd set up that actually worked properly, and then trying to kick off that early onboarding process that we had set up and see it working really in action. Because before we had our first customer, we had planned that initial onboarding process, and that was the start of the kind of productized journey.
Who was your first hire for £100 Social?
So we didn't hire anyone for ages. It was me and my co-founder. And then my colleague Emma, who is now our head of customer success and content, was the first main person who came and worked for us. And she's still working with us now, and she's fantastic.
I spoke with a couple of your colleagues and, they are very intelligent people. Yeah, I did. Rosie Thompson, shout out to Rosie. Hopefully she'll be listening, and it was just a presentation. She covered all my questions and I was like, this is a company that has their shit together. I was like, this is very good. I wish, I need to learn some of the things that you've got in place. My belief is that you don't need capital or huge amounts of money to be able to execute and come up with a business. Could you tell us about the fact that, you bootstrapped? Did you have things in place to say, okay, if we don't get a customer for this many months, we'll still be able to survive? How did you plan that for when you started your company?
This is obviously really bad advice to anyone wanting to start their own business, but we didn't.
Okay.
We started it. It was a kind of part-time on the side project. I was still running my other business. When I had time, I'd work on the website for the new business or, do this bits and bobs. And it was only once we started getting clients, then we gradually built up and gradually moved away from our previous roles and moved into this full time at the point where it was paying enough to allow us to do that, or we were bringing enough money from subscriptions. So we didn't really have an original kind of game plan like that. And I would say if I could go back and do it again, I would change that, because now I know that having a plan is the kind of holy grail of meeting goals. You've got to set goals to be able to meet those goals, and you've got to be able to set goals to look back and see where you were 6 months ago, a year ago, and how far you've come. So that's probably a regret, I'd say, about how we started the business. But it still worked, but we probably could have scaled it up quicker and more efficiently if we'd had that planning in place originally.
Yeah, plans, slans. I think those are things that are overrated sometimes. A lot of the times you just need to get on with it and you kind of learn on the go. And, sometimes we get MBA consultants coming in and they're like, have you planned your next 5 years cash flow forecast? I was like, what are you talking about? We need to get through, obviously you've got to have a bigger picture and also smaller picture. And sometimes you need both at the same time. And, as founders, I think you've got to juggle that in your mind. Both are equally as important as the other. But for example, we do film and one of our editors had a hard drive, and then my colleagues said, hey, can we get a courier to actually get this picked up from? I was like, courier? Why can't the editor just go to the post office and just send it to us first class? And I was like, look, you got to look after the pennies. But at the same time, I was like, I cannot say these things because, you've got to not micromanage. And I just said, okay, look, make the decision and I'll live with whatever you say. And I'll just said to him, look, I will back you whatever decision you make. And it was just small things like that. And I was getting stressed out about this. And at the same time, I was negotiating a big deal with another client of ours. And I was like, I shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. You You mentioned, you know what I mean, right? You know, and
Yeah, 100%. You know, you need to just leave it because in the scheme of things, it's insignificant. But in the moment, you're like, oh, this is not being done the right way.
you know, I just bit my tongue. I said, okay, you know,
Yeah,
whatever you decide, I will, because I don't want the same instance happening 100 times over for other
yeah,
100 decisions that they're going to be making. So it was just like, okay, just go on, get on with it, and you know, you do what you think is right. So I just didn't even bother. I just paid the invoice at the end of the day. And this is the kind of thing that every kind of business founder sort of goes through in a way, you know, like where you want to look at the details, but you don't. You're far too valuable to the business to do that. You mentioned setting goals. What is next for £100 Social?
growing and scaling up. We've only recently started actually putting a lot of effort and drive into our marketing, or we're kind of in the process of getting that plan together now. Until now, we've kind of, marketing has been on the back seat. And we've been kind of naturally growing and really honing up every single process internally so that the company is kind of in the place where we could rapidly scale without having any issues. And we're now at that point. So we're now starting to look at the marketing side so we can actually take that massive leap and hopefully really quickly increase.
You mentioned you have customers across the English-speaking world, you know, like I guess on the US, Canada, Australia. How does the fact that you have the name Pound does that actually make a difference, or do they think, oh, this, you know, has someone picked up on that?
So we only market within the UK. So all the
Okay.
customers we have from outside the UK have found us through recommendation or come across us on LinkedIn. So, but that is a really good question, and it's something I'm starting to look into at the moment as I'm thinking about expanding our marketing. We've only had one reaction. This was like 2 years ago from someone who said it sounds like £100 monkey, not like why are you calling your business that name? This was someone from the US, I should have said. But I'm not sure is the answer. I haven't got as far as looking into that yet, but it's next on the list.
You know, thank God we haven't joined the euro, right? I'm joking.
Oh, dangerous territory.
Yeah, exactly. Because you know you'd have to change the name. I was gonna make a joke, but no, it wouldn't work. I'll tell you offline. The other thing is, you know, like you as a business owner, you create this business out of necessity, and from the sounds of it, you know, you've got your processes and systems in place, and you've approached it from a very different way to a lot of business founders, which has, I mean, I guess you see the world from a different perspective. What do people often compliment you on in terms of your skill? What I mean is basically what I want to say is like, what are your biggest assets in a way as a person?
I think having that background in writing is really useful because I'm able to, I mean, most people can now make a website, but I think I can quite effectively create a website and effectively run the marketing and the branding side of things. I think having that mentality of wanting to have a flexible setup actually really simplifies things, because it means we've ended up with a really flexible, dynamic company. We're not burdened down by having an office, having massive overheads. In fact, our overheads are tiny, and that's comes from the fact that we wanted it to be built up to be that kind of flexible, remote-based business. So I think unintentionally, we've saved ourselves a lot of headaches through setting it up in that way.
Because I guess you were working remotely way before lots of people have been forced to do that. Is that right?
Yeah, so firstly, the business had to be remote because of my personal circumstances. And secondly, there's actually never been a moment since running this business where I've thought, oh God, if only we had an office. It's just never, it's like, there's literally no need for us to have an office. There's no need. I mean, we're running a service where we're providing largely written content, and our writers can work from their homes. They can work at midnight, they can work in their pajamas. It doesn't matter. They don't need to commute and come into an office to write effectively for our clients. Yeah.
How often do you guys kind of have a meeting in order to kind of exchange what your vision is? And do you meet regularly? Or what I'm trying to say is, what tips do you have for businesses who are having to make that adjustment from working in a fixed office where everyone gets together for a Monday morning meeting, and then you share ideas very, very constantly versus working virtually?
I think having physical meetings maybe every 3 to 6 months is quite important, especially with the core team of people who are interacting regularly, and making sure that when you do have online meetings, so we're having a fortnightly meeting with the whole team, and it's important to make sure that there's some chit chat in that meeting, that everyone has a chance to just chat and connect, and it's not just straight down to business, because when we're working remotely, obviously we don't have that like hello every morning, that little chat over a coffee break or making a coffee in the kitchen. So we miss out on that. So it is important to allow for that. I think as well, I'm lucky because of the nature of our business, the type of people who want to work flexibly from home, they all tend to be a similar type of people and they all fit and bond really well together. So that's definitely made it easier on that kind of team bonding side of things.
You mentioned attracting people all across the UK. You know, you don't have any geographical constraints. How do you find people to work with you? You know, like, do you have like a word of mouth recruitment system, or do people simply get in touch?
A couple of things. So basically, we mainly post in Facebook groups and to hire our writers and editors. And then for people joining the main team, we tend to, as far as possible, hire internally. So the people, so Rosie, for example, who you spoke to, she's also an editor and she's now working in different roles across the company as well. So we tend to hire internally where possible. And if not, again, it's posting in Facebook groups. Word of mouth, now our team's getting bigger. We're starting to get recommendations. So we're starting to get existing team members recommending people. So one thing we've recently started doing is every time we hire, we're going to ask the team first if anyone can refer anyone before we advert out wider.
Yeah, for us, we find the best people come through recommendations.
Yeah.
And even then, we still have a process of, you know, like, we learned the hard way where we've all made mistakes hiring people, where the first couple of people I made a mistake with was we hired someone, we thought, oh, this guy's a superstar, or this person is really, really great. We had really high expectations.
Yeah.
But they just didn't deliver. Whereas consistently we found getting recommendations from existing suppliers and consultants that we had were the best ones that we, you know, they lasted a lot longer because they knew the business and they knew what it was like to work with us, that kind of thing. In terms of your core management, how do you delegate your like big vision strategies, and do you have someone who helps you with your decision making, you know, not the everyday kind of work that your business provides? But you mentioned you have a co-founder. Do you talk more strategy and stuff with them, or do you talk more everyday business?
So Gary is someone who manages the financial side of stuff, and our board meetings we have are where we mainly go through the vision, what we're planning for the next quarter, and that's the kind of touch base with Gary, and he kind of gives me ideas and helps me make sure I'm staying on track. So that's the main kind of way that we bounce ideas around and decide how to move forward. And Gary's manages the financial side of stuff, and I think any idea you have ultimately is linked to the finances. So you look at it and you say, how's that going to impact the company? What do we need to spend to make that idea, or that marketing idea, or that new service offering idea? What do we need to spend to make that a reality? And then what results are we going to get after we've implemented it?
Going back to, you started the company in 2017. What has been your biggest learnings to date?
Good question. I think don't try and do anything unless you know how to do it yourself. So I think there's not a job in the company that I couldn't do, because most of the jobs I've written the processes for and done them first. Stuff like Google Ads, any kind of service offering that you're providing, I think you should never, as a founder, you should never ever try and offer or ask someone or expect someone to do something that you couldn't do yourself, or at least that you don't have a basic understanding of. I think there's a danger if you outsource some things like marketing jobs. Without understanding what you're outsourcing and how it works, there's a danger that you're going to be disappointed because the results are not going to be what you expected, or maybe you never understood in the first place what was possible. So I'd say invest time in making sure that you know that you have at least a basic understanding of how everything that your company offers and everything your company does is done. So that would be the first thing.
What has been the highlight and a low light of your journey so far?
A highlight is probably getting just to where we are today, being able to look back on where we started and how far we've come. It's great to see that there's people working for the company, that there's a team, and that's exciting when you think about it. You don't think about it much because it's just every day, but that is quite exciting. I guess probably will be recently Corona in March, April time, when I think the whole world panicked, and over a few weeks we lost a good chunk of customers. I think every business did, because people were panicking. We've got most of those customers, which is great, but yeah, that was a bit of a scary time, but luckily we've come through it without any issues.
You clearly have a good process in place. You're not working in the business, from what I could gather. What do you do during your downtime? Like how do you step away from your business? Do you read? Obviously you don't write anymore for personal reasons. But what do you do to kind of, like relax and take time away from when you're not thinking about your company?
I think it's very hard not to think about your company. It's
Yeah,
pretty
that's true.
much a full-time occupation. Even when you're trying to relax, it's always there at the back of your mind. But stuff would be reading, going to a book club, quite limited what you can do with Corona at the moment. But before Corona, it would be traveling, going on holiday, seeing family and friends. But if you're asking me in the present, it would be going for a walk, because there's not much else I can do right now. Same for you, I guess.
Yeah, going for a walk and going to either Aldi, Tesco's, or Sainsbury's. Those are my three top spots.
And it's now like a life highlight to go to a big supermarket, because it's more exciting than the little ones.
It's true, and I've seen people starting to dress up to Sainsbury's. It's
Yeah, the world has come to something funny.
90% of my wardrobe is useless. To be honest, I've got this coat on just because I wanted to kind of make a good impression on video. But I haven't worn a shirt and my coat or jacket for the last 6 months. It's just literally collecting dust. You mentioned books, you mentioned reading clubs. Do you read about business, or do you tend to go to kind of fiction?
I tend to read fiction, but I do read some business. So I recently read the book by the founders of Basecamp. It's called something like It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work, I think is the title. I thought that was really interesting, because there's so much stuff online about, it's kind of two things. There's firstly people who, it's like that badge of honor that I'm the founder and I work 57 hours a day and work every weekend and Christmas. And there's that one side of things that makes you think if you want to run a company, you've got to work nonstop. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum. You've got like that 4-hour work week. I remember who wrote it book, which is suggesting that you're not successful unless you found a way to almost detach yourself completely and do no work for your company. So the Basecamp book is really good. It says, you can't run a successful company if the company culture is that high stress, high long hours, and it doesn't try and tell you should work for 20 minutes a day to be successful. It sets out that middle ground, which I think is just realistic. At the end of the day, there's no point in, you don't have good ideas, you can't manage people effectively when you're stressed. But at the other end of the spectrum, I don't really see how anyone can run a business working 10 minutes a day.
Yes, it's this kind of, the entrepreneurs versus, someone who really knows what they're doing. And even then, the issues we probably have, the same as when you first started the company, it never goes away, but I think you become better at managing it. I was talking to a friend of mine and he was saying, this is the kind of life we have accepted, or this is the part of the job in a way, to take all the stress, but also be able to be the best person in the company to kind of see all that and still be able to kind of lead from the beginning as best as you can. Apart from books, do you actually watch any films or TV programs that kind of business related, or anything that you've secretly got some inspiration from?
To be honest, not really. I can't think of any films for you, I'm afraid, business films I've watched recently. But inspiration, I could think of a few bits.
Yeah, tell us a bit more.
So there's a founder called Laura Roder who founded a social media platform called Meet Edgar. And I've been following her since before I started this business. And I find her really inspirational, because she was one of the very early people to set up a remote company, kind of before it was a thing that people aspired to do. She was running a remote company, and her company was also completely bootstrapped. She did some work selling online courses originally, and then she used the money from that to fund her social media company. So I've found her quite inspirational, and her company also publish a lot of resources on their website about how they run their remote company. They've got their employee handbook free for anyone to access on the website. And when I started £100 Social, I actually found it really useful looking through the way they ran their business to help me work out how I wanted to run my business. And also looking at the software they used to run their business was quite useful for me. So if you're looking to start a business, I'd recommend going and looking at the Meet Edgar website and looking at their employee resources just to get a bit of inspiration.
Wow, we'll check it out. If you could go back and start £100 Social again, what would you do differently?
I think it would be what we touched on earlier about maybe having a plan in place a little bit earlier on, and maybe having a little bit more support earlier on from I don't know. I don't think I'd say people should go out and pay for a business coach, but maybe
Mm.
finding a family member who can just be that one person that you bounce your ideas off. I'd also avoid being oversaturated with advice. I think one thing I did early on is I mentioned that I joined loads of Facebook groups and would talk
Mm.
about our journey, and that really helps gain customers. But I would also participate in those groups and read all the advice that people were giving. And it's sometimes when you're starting out, you assume that everyone else knows better than you and you take every single bit of advice that's given to you. I think I would advise other founders to take a step back and actually assess, where's that advice coming from? Does that person really have more experience than me? And kind of maybe just take advice given from sources you don't necessarily trust or don't know if you can trust. Take them with a bit of a pinch of salt.
Where do you find your information from? Or, are there any sources that you kind of go on a regular basis to inspire you?
Mostly following people like the founders, like Laura Rhoda that I mentioned, and seeing the way they're doing things. Listening to podcasts, get new ideas, listening to just keeping an eye on news and trends, seeing what new stuff is coming out, but equally trying not to let all that influence your decisions on a day-to-day basis, because a trend this week you can waste hours trying to integrate that into your business and next week it's gone out of fashion. So, but mainly, I mentioned Gary, who I have the meetings with, the board meetings. That's the main bouncing of ideas and way to decide how to move forwards.
Do you tend to spend time with other founders, or not spend time, in person, but, do you bounce ideas with other people who are in different businesses?
No, not really. I'm still in a lot of Facebook groups and I follow those groups, but I'm probably like the creepy person who never comments now and just sees what other people are doing, but not on a kind of physically interaction basis, really.
Okay. I mean, obviously, without going into too much detail, or if you don't want to share, how has your life been since you've been in control of your destiny in terms of, your health, and you being able to create a lifestyle company which supports you and kind of has been molded for you?
It's good. It's not all like a bed of roses. You're not going to have it just because you start a company. It doesn't mean you've got a kind of dream lifestyle. There's still a huge amount of responsibility. Probably more responsibility than if you have a regular, if you're employed and having a regular job. But it definitely gives me that flexibility. It means that when Corona's not here, I can go on holiday. I can, if I really want to work less, I can work less. That might impact how the company grows, but I can still make that decision if I want to. So it definitely gives you that flexibility, and looking to the future, I think it's still a bit scary because it's a company that might not work out, but if it does work out, I've still got it gives me flexibility for how I manage my life going forwards.
Nice. I actually Googled this. Journalism and business owner, those are some of the most stressful jobs you can have. Like, are you secretly like an adrenaline junkie? Like you need that high to keep you on your foot, on your toes?
I don't think so. I really genuinely, when I started this business, thought it would be like giving you a relaxed lifestyle, but I don't think it does necessarily. But it wasn't really intentional.
I know exactly what you mean, because I think like you have good days and you have like really stressful days where sometimes you need to get stuff done and nothing else kind of needs to stand in the way. I know exactly what you mean. How can people get in touch with you?
So if you want to get in touch with me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you want to get in touch with £100 Social to find out more about our services, you can go on our website and click the book a call or the contact button and book in and speak to us. That's the best way to learn more about exactly what we can offer, is to speak to us directly.
Thank you so much for your time, Victoria. I personally think you have a very different perspective to how you're approaching the business than a lot of the founders I've been speaking to for this particular series. Without even thinking about it too much, I can tell you most of the people we've featured have been from graduate, corporate role, or, they've worked for a big or a smaller company somewhere, had this kind of entrepreneurial itch, and then created, this company, and the end result is whatever the end result is. And, it's refreshing the way you approach things in terms of how you productized your service from lessons that you learned from your previous business. So that was really interesting. I think there is definitely room for you to catch up. We definitely want to dig deeper and actually find out exactly how you productized your service, but that should be for another podcast in the future. Hopefully you'll come back, despite the amateur journalism.
I think it was brilliant.
If you were my editor, you'd probably fire me right now. Get out of my office. I never want to see your face again.
Oh, I highly doubt that.
That's the image I have of what it means to work as a journalist, especially in some of the top newspapers and magazines
to
in
get
this
yelled
country.
at all the time.
Does that really or someone throws a coffee in your face? That's
I never saw anyone throw a coffee in their face, but I just see a lot of people yelling, and a lot of like sweaty middle-aged men yelling at each other.
It's this kind of, or the devil's wear Prada. Someone really pushes you until you actually, because they know your potential, so they're pushing you to your limits, so that you come back with some good material or good copy or whatever you say. But thank you again for your time, Victoria. It's been a pleasure. And although we've connected on LinkedIn ages ago, I'm really happy that we actually had this chat and we got to find out a bit more about what's happening underneath the behind the scenes for £100 Social.
Thank you, Sads. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking.
Talk to you soon.
Speak to you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.